D'Ambrosio Urban. No, wait a sec. What was it?
That's a new one.
Yeah,
DAU,
I
maybe?
don't know where I saw it. It was like, wow, I can't imagine Frank doing that. So D'Ambrosio Urban Architecture, right?
Architecture and urbanism. Maybe you saw our daycare over in James Bay.
No, I don't. I
No?
can't remember where I saw it. D'Ambrosio. Sorry, say it again. I can't. So this is a community meeting for 902 Foul Bay, and we have I'd like to acknowledge the ancestral, traditional, and unceded Aboriginal territories of the Coast Salish people, and in particular the Wassanek and the Lekwungen, on whose territory we work, live, and play. My name is Joanna Fox. I'm chair of the Fairfield Gonzales Community Association Land Use Committee. Members of the Land Use Committee who are here tonight, Vice Chair, well, David was here and his internet went down, but he's coming back, David Malinsky, Don Monsoor, David Thompson, and Owen Seifert. Also present tonight is Luke Murray, Principal of Development for Arise Developments, Erica Sangster, an architect with D'Ambrosio Architecture and Urbanism, and Bianca Bodley with Biophilia, which is the landscape architecture firm. And I do believe we also have Alec Johnson, the City of Victoria planner for Fairfield Gonzales. The role of the CALIC is to facilitate dialogue between land use applicants and the community to provide feedback and identify concerns regarding land use applications which may influence the proposal and result in changes more appropriate to the neighborhood. A report of the meeting and other feedback received will be prepared by this committee and submitted to planning staff and the City Council. We are going to try and record your names from this virtual meeting rather than signing in a piece of paper, so we'll see how we do. We wish this to be a respectful meeting, allowing everyone the opportunity to speak and be heard. It is about the proposal, not about the applicant, other community members, or others involved in the project. This is the second community meeting for this proposal, as the changes in plans were felt to be significant. This meeting will provide discussion only regarding subjects that are within the mandate of the CALIC, which is specifically land use. Questions should not be about litigation, covenants, or OCP zoning. Those questions should be directed to city staff. There is no decision by the CALIC to support or oppose an application made at this meeting or after this meeting. We are facilitators and we're volunteers. The outcome of this meeting is a report to the city and city staff, sorry, the City Council and city staff. If this application is important to you, and I believe if you're on this call it is, you can stay involved by attending Committee of the Whole, public hearing, share your thoughts with council. And as many of you are familiar, I hope because we've explained this so many times, that the new temporary community meeting process is now to have all the plans on the development tracker, and you have an opportunity to provide a comment for 30 days, which I believe many of you have. This will end January 6th. And, oh, sorry, I meant to say that this meeting is being recorded. So it's being recorded. You can always ask for assistance or guidance from one of us via email. Again, many of you have, so thank you. To ensure that everybody has an opportunity to speak, I am taking down names of people as they send me their name in the chat. So just address me and I will put your name on there. You will have a 2-minute time limit, and we ask applicants to keep their answers short and to the point. You could have a response or follow-up question to the answer and keep it limited, please. We will be timing the speakers, and we have the ability to mute the speaker if they go beyond the allotted time, but we'd rather not do this. So please adhere to the time limit. We have found that the best meetings last a maximum 90 minutes. We're prepared to stay longer, but we'll determine at the 90-minute mark if we've exhausted all the discussion. So We will start with a the applicant will get a presentation, a 15-minute presentation, which I'll get to in a second. So yeah, so if you would like to speak, you can send me a little text or chat, sorry. And if you can give me an approximate address, so you don't have to be like totally specific, but it does help if we know that you actually live in the neighborhood. And you don't have to live in the neighborhood, it's just that it helps us. And then we'll, if you don't live in the neighborhood, we're also interested why you're interested in this meeting. Once we get through the list, if we still have time, we'll go back for second questions. And at the end of the meeting, we will attempt a verbal summary of this and of this meeting. So we're being recorded. We're going to listen to you. You get 2 minutes each, and we're going to start with Luke Murray with a 15-minute presentation on the 902 Fowl Bay. Okay, so over to you, Luke.
Great, thank you. Yes, as stated, my name is Luke Murray with Arise Developments and presenting Untitled Bay Road. This is our second CALEC meeting. Thank you for the acknowledgement, the land acknowledgement, Joanna, so I'll skip that part. But Arise, we're a local Fairfield-based developer builder. We exclusively limit our business to infill development, so we don't do kind of any suburban market type stuff or greenfield development. It's all kind of in-city stuff. And we're working with D'Ambrosio Architecture and Urbanism as the architecture firm on this project. We're supported by Biophilia, who's a landscape design firm. And early on in this project, we'd established a form of a project vision. And that was every neighborhood should have architecturally significant diverse housing types and tenures for all incomes and demographics. And that was critical to enabling a high quality, densified, walkable lifestyle, which we believe is critical to our climate and housing crisis, but also results in more livable, healthy communities. From there, we established some design vision principles, and that was a neighborhood scale density, sympathetic architecture, ground-oriented housing types, which means front doors on the street, to also support a sustainable lifestyle, meaning a car-light lifestyle, and then also the introduction of this BC Housing Affordable Home Ownership Program. In terms of the policy context, the site falls within traditional residential, which is roughly 70% of Victoria's land base, and it calls for ground-oriented housing forms from single-family to houseplexes, townhouses, and mixed-use buildings up to 3 stories, depending on the location. We're also, as stated, proposing to work with BC Housing on their Affordable Home Ownership Program, which is a shared equity model, and it has a couple benefits like below-market home ownership, down payment support, and it recycles the home appreciation over time to fund future affordable housing projects within the city. Many of us know where the site is. It's at the corner of Qualification, Fowl Bay, and Redfern, so it has 3 frontages in the Gonzales neighborhood just south of Oak Bay Ave. We ran the site through what's called a Neighborhood Proximity Index, which is a series of data sets from StatCan and Census and BC Assessment to look at proximity to different urban amenities. And these are standardized across the country. So they range from childcare to libraries to parks and transit and employment centers. And we establish a Victoria baseline and then test the site to see how it performs over the Victoria baseline. And this particular site performs high out of the scale. So it's a good candidate for densification because it's got nearby supportive amenities for the residents. When we look at the neighborhood grain, this is a NOLI map, which looks at building footprints, obscuring vegetation and other details. And it's really just to look at footprints of structures. And under current zoning, we could subdivide the property into 4 single-family lots, which results in these rough envelopes on the property. But when we look at our townhouse footprint, it's not much larger than footprints in the area of larger estate homes and housings in the area. And when we overlay the 2 on top of each other, it is a fairly light impact on the ground when you consider how many homes that we're able to utilize on the property. We then took design inspiration from the surrounding architectural expression, being craftsman era homes. There's a strong thematic presence of front gabled roof forms, textured cladding made up of lap siding or shingles, and then windows and balconies inset with a classic front porch. We also looked to the existing heritage rock wall, the old house that was on the property, and we're proposing to kind of renovate that rock wall and strengthen it, and then also reuse some of the granite from the foundation of the old house to rebuild sections and some benches on the property. At a glance, the project height is 3 stories. The site area is about half an acre, and the floor area is roughly 15,000 square feet. And we land at 0.72 FSR, which is a floor space ratio. We're allowed one FSR under the OCP, so we're under that. There's 18 homes on the project, 2 one-bedroom homes, 16 3-bedroom homes with an average unit size of 1,100 square feet. Roughly 50% of the site is classified as open space, and there's 16 car stalls, all pre-wired for electric charging, and 36 bike stalls, and then every unit gets a moto membership to the nearby moto car. When we look at the site layout, we looked at the existing vegetation and started to serrate and erode the edges to match Foul Bay's curve and the peripheral trees on the property to try and retain as many as we could. The landscape design was largely an envision of future residents nestled in a semi-wild landscape with native perennials, grasses, shrubs, to create some visual contrast between the clean lines of the architecture and try to enhance some biodiversity on the property. As you can see, as I mentioned, these kind of serrated building forms is to try to dodge these peripheral trees in the critical root zones. And then the foundations and landings of the buildings were designed to minimize impact to those critical root zones to maintain some canopy on the property. When we look at a tree removal map, we are removing roughly 5 municipal boulevard trees and then 17 on-site protected trees, but we're replacing them with 34 trees of different kinds, including Gary oaks and pin oaks. There was some correspondence that's asked why originally we had mentioned 3 protected trees removed and now there's more. And that's largely a difference of a bylaw change. So when we first presented this plan in November of 2019, there was an old tree preservation bylaw. And recently, in November of this year, that a revision was done to change the definition of a protected tree. And so this new number is essentially reflecting that new bylaw change, which is why more trees are now listed for removal. But when we look at the critical root zones, it kind of highlights the impossibility of retaining every tree on the property. If we look at what's available as this dashed line, we could barely fit one 1,800 square foot house on the property without impacting a critical root zone. So in our minds, we're trying to balance the interest of housing affordability, densification, and maintaining tree canopy through a replanting plan. The material board is a mix of metal roof, shingle cladding, metal window frames, and a mix of different colorations of cementitious panels with some stucco and architectural concrete. The planting palettes for the low plants are a mix of drought tolerant plants, native species, edibles, and pollinators to try and reinvigorate after removal of some of the canopy to reinvigorate new growth in the future. In terms of the elevations, this top one is the view from Foul Bay. This is looking down Quamachin, and it's a flat image, so you don't see the serration of the building forms, but it does show that there's 2 building blocks with this repetitious roof line to reflect some of the architecture in the neighborhood, and the replanting plan to kind of mitigate some of that height impact. And on the Redfern side, the site falls away grade-wise significantly, and you can see the retention of these peripheral trees, and then those front stoops really interacting well with the road, with all driveway access coming off the north side of the property. In terms of the floor plans, the habitable floor starts actually as a basement level with 3 bedrooms down, with these large window wells to bring light into those spaces. And then on the main floor plan, we see our access off the north side of the property with the parking stalls, and then the upper floor of those units. And this key diagram really shows that it's a stacked housing form, so it's a townhouse on top of a townhouse. And the green units are the above units where they're accessed off the street. And this is the upper floor of those green units, where you have your kitchen, living room, dining room. And then we have these 2 one-bedroom units over top of the parking. And then the final floor area is those 3 bedrooms on the very highest floor of those upper townhouses. Here's a street view from Qualification looking east, and we can see the retention of these peripheral trees and the rock wall, refurbished with these gate cuts to allow pedestrian access to and from the property. This is a view a little bit further up, looking down Redfern, and we can see there's a new sidewalk that we're proposing with a little bulb out for some additional boulevard trees, and then the access on the north side of the property. This is the view from Foul Bay Road looking north, and once again that rock wall with the cuts, and the site drops a little bit here, so we have this a bike pavilion set down here with a green roof, and then there's a small children's playground on the other side of it. This is looking down Foul Bay South, and we can see now we can see how the building steps away from the curve of the road, and that's to mitigate kind of those impacts as you drive down Foul Bay Road. And the final view from Redfern, showing the access, and these are those one-bedroom units over top of parking. These have a green roof, and then we put a pergola on this surface parking to screen it from the neighbor, and we put a green roof on it just to soften its visual impact. And these trees are retained trees with these new plantings going in with that new sidewalk. In terms of transportation, we've proposed a restricted right turn with signage out of Redfern, with a either traffic calming bump out or a speed bump to slow down any proposed traffic on the street. But when we look at the trip generation, this is using a series of data sets from projects across North America. There really isn't a reason to turn north down Redfern when you have such better connectivity on Qualification and Foul Bay. And so the traffic engineer's report essentially shows that at peak AM trips are potentially 2 additional cars down Redfern, with the PM trips being 1 additional car. And the total trip generation north down Redfern is estimated to be 5 to 6 cars. So it's almost a negligible impact, with the majority of traffic using that left-hand turn to go from Qualification down to Richmond, or Qualification to Foul Bay to head north to south to Fairfield Road or Oak Bay Ave to access the area. Further, it has a very good very walkable store. It's located within 40 meters of a motor car, and the various proposed and current bike routes with good transit connectivity. And then the road network is actually a very fine grain network, which allows good connectivity, so that no single road is bearing the total blunt impact of traffic. And within the property, there is, within a 2.5-minute walk, there's 252 on-street parking stalls, and within a 5-minute walk, there's 841 on-street parking stalls. So Gonzales is actually blessed with the most amount of on-street parking in the city of Victoria. In terms of the shadow studies, in the June shadow study here, there's very limited shadows. Most of them are contained within the site, and then the late shadow does have some shadows going onto the street at the 5 p.m. time. In March, there is some early morning shadows on this accessory structure, and then it clears up, and it's on vacant ground, not impacting the neighboring houses to the north. And in December, our buildings do shadow the northern buildings as the sun is so low in the sky. But there's also trees on the property that are not captured in this, which are already creating some shadows. So the net impact for the amount of housing that we're able to utilize on the property is actually quite low, which is nice to see. In terms of consultation, we've done a series of mailouts to date in some previous meetings. And where we are in the application process is we've gone through advisory design panel, which is a panel of architects and landscape architects that comment on design of the building, and they voted unanimously to support the project. And then we also went to the Heritage Advisory Panel, and they supported the project. There was, I think, a 4-1 or 5-1 vote in favor of the project, including the heritage aspects of the project. And I kind of wanted to close with a bit of a note, because obviously there's a lot of keen interest in this project. And this is a bit of an exhortation to us to kind of rise to the challenge together, but I want to highlight something about this process that as a collective group, we need to reconsider. Somewhere along the way, some civility seemed to have gotten lost on this process. And believe it or not, we actually respect your rights to comment on this project, and believe that opposition to projects is a foundation to the democratic process that we undertake together. But on the flip side, we as applicants do have rights under common law and current legislation to make applications for change to covenants or zoning or other regulations. That said, there's a recent email put out by the Gonzales Neighborhood Association, and it was kind of disappointing because almost all of that email was a distortion of the truth or a flat out fabrication. And myself personally in our company, we're kind of painted as villains in order to support the position of opposition to the project. But then when I started reading the emails coming through the city feedback process, the opposition emails are almost exclusively repetitive talking points that were put forward in that email. And these emails are coming from residents that have never responded to chat with us, and I didn't recognize a lot of their names. And so I just wanted to encourage you that if you want to oppose the project, that's your total right. But this project also needs you. It needs your feedback to be the best version that it can be. And so instead of drawing lines in the sand and getting stuck on sticky points, let's try to find common ground to work from through this dialogue here tonight. We may not agree on all aspects of the project, but there are aspects that we can dialogue and agree to. So in the end, if you want to oppose the project, it's your right, but we do think that you owe it to yourself to do so with truthful and accurate information. So contrary to the narrative, we're a totally open book to the project, to details in the project and the process to those that want to talk to us. So if you want to learn more, come directly to us, the source, before you pass your judgment, because I think there's conversations that could take place that haven't, that could be really good. So thank you tonight for your time.
Thank you, Luke. That you still have 18 seconds, but that's okay. We'll cut it off there. So we will start with some questions. If you are a phone caller, you will need to enter *6 in order to unmute yourself. So just, I'm not sure who's, well, obviously the people who I can see aren't phone callers, but so I'm going to go down the list of who we have. And we're going to start with, and you have 2 minutes, as I said, Jeannie Squarebricks.
That's right. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you. Yep.
Okay, good. Okay, I don't have any questions. I just have a little write-up, which is hopefully under 2 minutes. I'm Jeannie Squarebriggs. I've lived for 21 years on Brighton Crescent, which is a 3-minute walk up from 902. And my concerns regarding the development as it stands now center around density, ecology, and safety. So density, the proposed number of units seem too many and squished on a small lot between the main artery of Foul Bay Road and very narrow Redfern. And wondering, has the developer considered decreasing or modifying the floor space ratio of the townhomes? And ecology, the density and spread of the built form directly impacts protected trees, specifically Gary Oak and their sensitive ecosystem. A Redfern unit encroaches upon 1/3 of the oak's critical root zone. There's a proposed bike storage pavilion which would cut down a protected copper beech, and although not an accessory building per se, would this storage construction not fall under the Tree Protection Bylaw 050-106, Section 5.3? If protected trees are cut down, it affects the trees or the city's tree canopy, air quality, and the habitat for birds, other vertebrates, and non-vertebrates. Why do we have a tree protection bylaw and give voice to mitigating climate change via trees if we don't follow through? We lose them in the interest of development square footage. And safety. The arterial Foul Bay Road is zoned 30 kilometers per hour. We all know that cars use Brighton Crescent and Redfern to circumvent that and speed along narrow Redfern. The density of the development and traffic overflow with increased owner vehicles, their guests, deliveries, etc., poses a safety hazard to neighborhood children, walkers, dogs, and other vehicles, including bikes. And the sole entrance for cars to the townhomes being off Redfern adds to those safety concerns. And just a quick note on affordability. To me, it's a catch-all term. It's quite mutable, and the question really is affordable for whom? So again, my main concerns are density, ecology, and safety, and that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeannie.
You're welcome.
Sorry?
I'm good.
Our next speaker will be Carlton. Sorry, I didn't get your last name. Carlton, are you still? Oh, Carlton is on the phone.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You can go ahead.
How do you do? So I'm Carlton Monk, M-O-N-K. And I used to live at 1927 Qualification, and I intend to return to live there. For the last 2 months, I'm living in Leonard Street right now. So I oppose this project and a change to the zoning bylaw for 2 reasons. One is the past neglect the heritage property has suffered, and 2, it would set a dangerous precedent for the protection of heritage properties in Victoria. So the previous owner was a developer who did nothing really to restore or repair the property. On the contrary, he neglected it and then conveniently sold it. Before the building burned down, Mr. Large came to my home, knocked on the door, and we had a conversation. And during that conversation, he asked what I thought about the idea of burning the house down. Now, I do not suggest here for 1 minute that Mr. Large had a hand in the fire, but the conversation clearly illustrated that he did not really care a whit about the heritage designation. So, unfortunately, when the developer gets a hold of a heritage property, it's a little akin to the fox in charge of the hen house. Now, after the fire, all that remains are the trees. But these trees were an important part of the rare triple heritage designation of the property that was originally granted. Now, when I look at the project, from what I understand, this project calls for the destruction of roughly half the trees. And I feel these trees must be protected, not only for the sake of this heritage property, but also for all heritage properties that have the misfortune of falling into the hands of developers. Please preserve what remains of this heritage property. If you don't, what message does it send? That heritage property doesn't matter? That the profit of a company is more important than a heritage property? Anyway, please establish a good precedent. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlton. Our next speaker is Mary, and sorry, Mary, I don't know your last name. And you need to press *6 to unmute your phone.
I unmuted. Okay.
We can hear you.
Okay. It's Mary Duty Jones, and I live on Kipling Street and take interest in especially Gonzales and Kipling. Following on the previous speaker, I have huge concerns about the trees, and it's amazing. I want to say I have a dogwood, and it's really in bad shape. I've got my permit, and I have to pay $700 for each tree, 2 trees, to take it down. But the developers use that cost to like a license. Anyway, what is important? There are 2 things here. Under climate change, that removing trees warms the earth and aids climate change, and it takes 169 young trees to equal 1 mature tree. I don't think that was a magnificent one. The second one is the process, to which he was kind of alluding there, because the city there is a covenant on the property. He didn't say so directly, and he's going ahead with the plan, and the city is allowing this plan to be followed, even though it isn't legally possible right now. So this is bad plan. Excuse me. It's not illegal, unfortunately. It is unethical, and the city did send, I heard, a letter to the developer asking him to take off the covenant. There's a covenant also, which people must realize, on about 100 other lots around. What is doing is breaking up the whole lot so that developers can descend and trees can come down. Okay?
Thank you, Mary.
Joanna, are we allowed to clarify points related to statements?
You are given a short amount of time to do so, yes.
So I just wanted to clarify, the city has not sent us anything requesting that the covenant come off as part of this process. So they don't actually, they're not involved in it. They're not a party to the covenant. It's a private covenant. And so just a point of clarification, that's all. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Jim Keith. Jim, you're muted. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, hi. First of all, I want to say thank you to you, Joanna, and your committee as volunteers. This is a major task to behold. We certainly appreciate what you're doing. I'm trying to understand the context of this development. And where I'm going is, I believe this is part of the Gonzales neighborhood, and there is a Gonzales neighborhood plan. Is that correct?
Yes.
So does that plan, which is almost 20 years old, provide the context for the evaluation of this proposal?
I'm going to direct your question to Alec Johnson, who's the city planner for Fairfield Gonzales.
Thanks, Joanna. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Alex.
Hi. Thanks for the question. So the Gonzales Neighborhood Plan is one of the relevant policy documents that that's included in the staff analysis of the proposal. So yeah, we evaluate the proposal against the Gonzales Neighborhood Plan policies, as well as the policies of the official community plan and other relevant city policy documents.
So two subsequent questions then. Is there any policies in that document that apply to this site? I went online, I couldn't seem to be able to locate it. And I guess the second question is to you, Joanna, and your committee. I thought I heard you say you're simply recording the responses of residents at this stage. You're not making a recommendation or taking a position. I was unclear on that.
You're correct. The CALEC, the Community Association Land Use Committee is responsible for facilitating community engagement between the community members and the applicants for development proposals. And we do not form opinions or make recommendations. We just call it as we record it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
And I guess your other question, Jim, there aren't any policies in the Gonzales plan that are specific to this property, but all of the policies related to housing and the preservation of or provision of open site space, the preservation of neighborhood character and elements that contribute to the neighborhood character, the preservation of trees. Those policies are relevant to the consideration of this proposal.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
If I have a moment, I have one question for Luke Murray.
Jim, sorry, can we come back to you?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll come back to you. I'll put you on round 2. Maybe the question will get asked by somebody else in the meantime. Alan Lomer.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Alan Loomer. I live directly across the street on Qualification facing this property, and I've been here for 35 years. One of the reasons that I'm so opposed to this project is what has been destroyed is the jewel of our neighborhood. This property and that house that used to be on there, when I look out my kitchen window in the morning, that's the first thing I see. And it was just a pleasure to live in a neighborhood that had such a property. What Mr. Murray is proposing is just overwhelming. It's going to overshadow everything in this neighborhood, change the atmosphere of this neighborhood. The height, you know, he's talking about a 3-story building, but the presentation that he showed, there are 4 levels high. To me, that's a 4-story building. Anyhow, another great concern that I have is for the safety. with the addition of the bike lanes on Richardson, of course, Richardson will be closed off to traffic. Quamachin Street in the mornings from about 7:45 till nearly 8:30 is the approach road for people dropping their children off at Glen Lyon School. The traffic is very, very heavy for that half-hour period. It's also the prime time that most people are leaving to go to work and children going to school. With the opening of or closing down of Richardson, that's going to divert an awful lot more traffic onto Quamachin Street heading downtown. In addition to that, the bike lanes, the bike lane on Richardson, Redfern is now going to become a significant access for people cycling down that street to get to that bike lane. With the addition of all these houses, Redfern is a very narrow street with parking on both sides. There are no sidewalks from end to end. That is from Quamachin up to Brighton. People walk their dogs. Kids play in the street. There are days like yesterday, for instance, when the garbage truck came by, it comes down Redfern, it could barely get through. The impact of all of this extra traffic that's going to come around here is going to be dangerous as hell for these children, for cyclists, and for any other people walking around here. So a big concern of mine is safety, and also the process that was how this is going through, but I guess this is not the correct forum for that. So thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Our next speaker is Peter Nadler. Peter, you're on mute.
There we are.
Yep, thank you.
So I live within a 4-minute walk of the site. And I was just going to talk tonight about the reason why I'm opposed to this proposal. That I'm opposed to the proposal because it isn't truly affordable housing project. It's too big, it's too high. It's going to remove over 60% of the trees and will create a traffic safety issue. And it's out of character for the neighborhood. However, Mr. Murray raised the issue of process and consultation, so I'm going to speak a bit about that. During the Roto development, Arise didn't do a very good job of community engagement. And during this process, Arise was worse. They went after any opposition or criticism on social media, using adjectives like fabrication, as he did today. And on the first CALUC meeting, they were vague on tree removal, traffic flow and access, and incorrect on height. So, notwithstanding the fact that the city staff requested a second CALUC meeting, Mr. Murray initially refused to conduct a second CALUC, saying that he preferred to have private controlled meetings with only select community members, not aware of anyone in the immediate surrounding area who participated in such consultation. But after 6 months of requests from the community, on December 7th, Arise finally agreed and to the required online survey and then this public engagement. And contrary to what Mr. Murray said tonight, city staff in their May summary report directly requested that Arise retain counsel and remove or deal with the restrictive covenant as early as possible in the process to ensure a timely processing of the application. So Arise is litigating the removal of the covenant, but it did so in a way that notified as few people as possible and tried to mislead and intimidate the few neighbors that it did notify, and then tried to discredit the neighbors' fundraising campaign on social media.
Excuse me, Peter, there are two things we need to discuss. Peter, we need to discuss something here. We were asked at the beginning not to take any approaches to anybody in particular.
Well, Mr. Murray did exactly that, and I'm responding to it.
Excuse me. And secondly, the applicant did not refuse a CALUC. The second CALUC was only brought forward in the early weeks of December, and when he was asked.
With all due respect, I have a screenshot of Mr. Murray refusing a CALUC, so he did in fact refuse one numerous times. So we're in a climate of a housing crisis, and therefore it makes no sense whatsoever to build expensive housing that very few can afford, and it removes 60 of the mature trees. Had Rise engaged with the community neighborhood in a respectful way and proposed an appropriate project which was truly affordable and more centered on the lot, retaining most of the trees, they would likely have received a much warmer reception than they're getting and have received to date. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Sarah Murray.
Joanna, I think that point for clarification, which is useful, is that we had Arise and the Community Association had corresponded earlier in the year, and the Community Association had actually given us a waiver to any CALUC because we presented the Community Association the changes, and at that time it was deemed that the changes were not large enough to warrant a second CALUC. And then the Community Association recently revised the opinion and then asked us to host a meeting, and we agreed. So I think that's maybe where there's some confusion on this, but there was no, Arise never refused to host a meeting. It was never requested through the appropriate channels. And so we're here tonight, and so that's
exactly
no, that's
true.
not true, actually. It's not true at all.
Excuse me, Peter, you're speaking to the CALUC committee, and I'm sorry. I'm going to have to correct you he is correct.
I'm going to send you a screenshot where he clearly states he has no intention of conducting a second.
Okay, so we're here tonight, and we're going to continue with our speakers. If we can continue, please, with Sarah Murray.
Hi, folks. Thank you for hosting this meeting tonight. So I live right around the corner from the development location, right at the corner of McNeil and Powell Bay. And I just have to say that this is exactly the kind of development that I want to see in the neighborhood that I live in. The site is on a bus route that I use very often. It's adjacent to a bicycle route that I also use very often. It's located right beside a moto car that I also use regularly. And it demonstrates, or it responds to a type of housing that we actually really need in this neighborhood. We need more housing variety. I remember going to the Oak Bay, and I know that this is Victoria, not Oak Bay, but I remember going to the Oak Bay housing assessment back in January of last year and hearing from other people in the room that their grandchildren and their children can't find housing in this neighborhood. They can't find housing in the neighborhood where they'd like to send their children to school. And this actually fits that need. This responds to that need. I'm also hearing from my neighbors that there's a lot of concern about climate change, and I hear that. I'm a young person who's also concerned about the climate, but I think that there's a lot of ways to react to climate change and be mindful of that. Living a car-light lifestyle, not having your own vehicle, living in a walkable neighborhood, those are all ways to respond to fears about climate change. And I think my only question would be, if the developer would be interested in advocating for the use of or having an extra moto vehicle being put in, and if that could be a van, because that's something that this neighborhood could use. The moto around the corner is quite frequently used, and we could really use a van in this area for a moto vehicle. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. I do remember we had an application in for a development on Cook Street, and at that point they had suggested a car moto, a van moto, and some other, I think there was like a sedan and a hatchback and a van or something. So I do believe that there is that opportunity. Maybe that's an opportunity. Maybe that's possible.
Yeah, so briefly, Sarah, to answer your question, we reached out to Moto, and the response was that the area didn't have enough demand at this time for a second vehicle. So they recommended going the lifetime membership route. So we're happy to check in with them again, but that was the response that we got when we first contacted them.
Okay, thank you. Elizabeth Petty, sorry. You're on mute, Elizabeth?
Okay, I should be hearable now.
Yes, we can hear you, thanks.
Okay, first of all, I would like to say thank you for the opportunity to speak and for this meeting. Luke, I want to thank you for the presentation. I felt it was a very considered presentation, and it looks as though a lot of thought and certainly a lot of effort has gone into the design. That said, my partner Dermot and I, who live here at Runnymede and Richardson at the corner, are opposed to the development because of its size. We have an interest in seeing much more density in this neighborhood and in Victoria in general. And certainly some of the aspects of the development support not just more density and more housing availability, but things like the walkability and the access are good aspects of the development. But it just feels too big for this neighborhood, out of character with this neighborhood in a way that it feels like we're going from 0 to 60 in terms of moving toward being allowing for more density. Someone earlier, and someone has said, I believe it was you, Luke, who said that a lot of people are repeating the same points. I think some of the points that have been made are worth repeating. I agree with several points that have been made. We have concerns about the number of trees that are being removed, particularly the older trees. And we also have concerns about the additional traffic and the safety factors associated with that. So we are not opposed to the development period. We are simply opposed to it being as big as it is and as high as it is. I think it's 3 or 3.5 stories, but my understanding is that each floor will be 9 feet. So we're talking about quite an imposing development for a neighborhood for which it will be out of character. So those are my comments, and I've kept them relatively short, I think, to allow as many other people as possible to speak.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Lynn Phillips. Is Lynn still here? I can't see everybody on the screen because there's too many people. So
yes, I'm still here.
Okay.
I live fairly close to this location, and I completely agree with what Elizabeth just said. She summed it up quite nicely. This development is not appropriate for this neighborhood, not the size, the height, the scale of it. It's just not appropriate. It's too destructive. There's going to be the loss of many mature trees. And I just watched a mature Gary oak get chopped down by somebody else at the end of our street yesterday, and it was devastating. And there's going to be, I think it's 22 protected trees that would be lost in this project. And I do not believe that this is a quote unquote affordable development. So it takes away a lot and brings very little to the neighborhood. That's pretty much it.
Thank you, Lynn. Drew Smith.
Hi, my name is Drew Smith. I live on Redfern Street, just down from the proposed development. We've lived here for over 25 years. Our neighborhood is, well, you know our neighborhood, it's quite diverse. And I think that I would like to respond a little bit to what Luke talked about in terms of tone. Our neighborhood isn't used to this kind of rancor and tone. I've heard that we've been referred to sort of NIMBYs or something like that. It's not welcome here. We're not like that. Your culture or what you're bringing is not welcome. I think just the size, it's too large at 18 units. Many people have spoken about that, so I'm not going to go on about it. But I think with the large size comes too much traffic. My car has been hit on a hit and run 3 times. And that's with the arrival of Red Barn. And with the arrival of 18 units, you know, I just think that somebody's going to get hit. Something's going to happen here, and I don't think it's a safe plan. The footprint is going to result in the removal of so many trees, and that's what our community is about, our neighborhood is about, is the trees and the feel. And I think you need to look at maybe, I looked at 1884 Gonzales. That's a recent development. They put in 3 units, and I think that's much more consistent. Sorry, my cat's trying to join the video. And I think that's much more consistent with what our neighborhood would welcome. The heritage aspects, I just want to echo that. It's really disappointing that we lost that beautiful house. And I think that we have to send a signal to developers to say we value our heritage. And when they burn down under mysterious circumstances, it's not an opportunity to put 18 units on the property. It's just, it's not appropriate. I think that concludes my remarks. Thanks very much for this, Joanna. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew. Sorry, I just lost everybody's faces and my chat capabilities, so I hope you're hearing me. David Barry.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. My name is David Barry. I'm 27 years old. I grew up in the neighborhood and I now live around 4 blocks away. So friends I grew up with are all leaving the neighborhood and going to Langford because there's no affordable housing options. Density is much needed in all of Victoria, and this area, which is so walkable, there's a bike lane, there's going to be bike shelter on this property. It's much needed, and it's sad seeing all my friends, all of the people I grew up with, probably people here's kids, moving away, moving to Langford, having a nice big commute in their cars, because people won't allow developments like this. I just want everybody to think when they're talking about climate change, they're talking about all these things. Do you account for the commutes in from these West Shore developments? Do you account for the trees getting torn down in the West Shore for people that are like everyone's children moving out there? I beg to differ with the kids running on the street getting hit by cars because there's hardly any kids left. No young families can afford here. Yeah, I just want to express that I'm vastly in favor of this. I hope more get put in. I don't think blaming Arise for a fire that had nothing to do with them makes any sense. And cutting down one beech tree to allow for bike parking might do more for the environment than cutting down the beech tree. Yeah, that's about it. I just hope people think about maybe how much they bought their house for, how much it's worth now, and think about the younger people that want to live in the neighborhood, want to be able to bike to work, want to be able to walk to work. Yeah, think about the next generation. Thanks.
Thank you, David. Monique Janton. Monique, are you still on? Okay, so Monique, are you on?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Great, thank you. I live at the junction of Redfern and Brighton, a block away from 902 Foul Bay. I work as a volunteer under the guidance of Victoria Parks, preserving and restoring our Gary Oak Meadows. We have less than 4% of this unique ecosystem remaining in our region, so it is essential to preserve remnants, including those on private property. The scale of the proposed construction, with 18 townhouses on 902 Foul Bay, requires the loss of 24 trees. One of the Gary Oaks retained will have 4-story townhouses situated within its critical root zone. The developer's landscape plan indicates no replacement of 6 Gary Oaks lost, possibly because the site coverage of the construction would leave little room for trees of that scale. And I note for the 18 families on the property, there's only a tiny play area. That's how dense the construction is on the lot. Many cyclists and walkers enjoy our neighborhood because of our beautiful tree canopy. Of special importance are the two huge copper beeches at 902 Foul Bay that have greeted visitors to our neighborhood for 100 years. Both are slated for removal, as are 6 Gary Oaks and an arbutus. As many conservationists and landscape designers often say, the best tree is the one you've got. Why? Because it's proven it can thrive where it lives. Trees are essential to the character of this neighborhood. They are food and shelter to birds, pollinators, and mammals. And big trees are our #1 weapon against climate change, sequestering carbon, absorbing water in heavy rain events, producing oxygen, providing shade in summer, etc. I hope you will support our community's efforts to save the trees at 902 Foul Bay. Thank you.
Thank you, Monique. And thank you for being very—
This is Bianca here. May I clarify some of the comments that were made by your previous caller?
Yes, you may. Bianca is with the Landscape Architect Company.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm the landscape designer on the file. So we are replacing 4 Gary Oaks on the site, as well as 4 pin oaks, which have a large canopy and grow faster. So we like to pair them together. And in addition to that, I just wanted to state that we are creating a Gary Oak understory in all of the plantings on the site, using plants directly from the Gary Oak meadow list, both shrubs, perennials, bulbs, and all the rest. So our desire is to, with the landscape that is available on the site, is to basically make it a Gary Oak understory, and then we'll be removing all of invasives except for 1 tree, and the rest of it will be replaced thoughtfully with natives. Just wanted to clarify that.
May I ask a question? Because I reviewed your landscape plan on the development tracker, and there was no replacement of Gary Oaks listed. None.
Since the previous CALIC meeting, we have submitted a new landscape plan.
And Bianca, can I ask, that should be on, that should be available for viewing on the development tracker, am I not correct?
Perhaps Alec, you can speak to that. I'm not in control of the city's information.
Alec?
Yep. The most recent plans that have been submitted to the city are available on the development tracker, as well as the previous versions.
Great, thank you. Next speaker is Aaron Hill.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, thanks for the presentation, the meeting. My family and I live on Redfern Street, the same street as the proposed development, about a block and a half away. We bought our house on the street 3 years ago, in large part because of the trees in this neighborhood, and this property and its trees are really a jewel of the street. We love the walkability. We're definitely in favor of increased density in our neighborhood, and we obviously need more affordable housing in our city and the neighborhood. And we would welcome a multifamily unit on this property, but this proposed development is too big and kills too many trees. And there are medical studies showing the health benefits that come from proximity to elements of the natural world like trees, and we don't want to lose those. I'm an ecologist by profession and training, and I'm concerned about the loss of habitat that would occur from the loss of the canopy structure of the big trees that would come out in the length of time without that structure, while the smaller trees that are planted grow out over many years. I'm also concerned about the traffic on the street. I have a 10-year-old daughter, and she walks to school at Margaret Jenkins along that street. She walks her dog down that street. She plays with her friends on that street, and there's no sidewalk on the street, and the traffic is it's concerning because the street's so narrow and there's parking on both sides. And you know, I'd like to respond to the gentleman who said there's no young families in this neighborhood. There have been several other young families have actually moved into the neighborhood while I've been here, and I can think just off the top of my head of at least 10 young families within a 1 to 2 block radius that just I'm aware of that my daughter plays with and goes to school with, and I know that there are more. Yeah, so I think the idea that building a few extra townhouses on this site and killing all those trees is somehow going to make Victoria more affordable in terms of its housing is false, and it's not going to stop Langford from mowing down more forest to build more townhouses there. We need to protect the magnificent old trees and the habitat that they represent in our neighborhood and the quality of life and the health benefits they bring. And we'd welcome a more appropriate proposal from the developer on this site that would increase the density, but in an appropriate way. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Doug Sheetal.
Hello?
Hi, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I live on Redfern, just up a few houses from the 902. And my wife and I took the opportunity when Luke invited anybody who wanted to view this and quite a while ago, and met with him and saw and we thought he had a very reasoned approach. We feel too that there's not enough density in this area, and it's becoming exclusive. And that doesn't provide for the best neighborhood when you only have people who can afford $1 million homes. And I know that there have been a number of nurses from Royal Jubilee, firefighters who want to live closer to where they work and can't afford to. And I think it behooves us all to try and make that possible for these kind of people. As far as playground, not having a lot there, a lot of us don't have a playground at our homes. My granddaughters love to go to the park off of Richardson, which is just a couple of blocks walk. And it's a big area with swings and stuff and a baseball field and a dog-free or dog-run park. So there's lots of park space close by anyway, and same with Redfern Park on the other side of Redfern, on the other side of Oak Bay is walkable. We've been there with our granddaughters as well. And so I think it's because it's such a walkable neighborhood, and you can walk into Oak Bay Village, we walk to our dentist, we can walk to groceries, we can pretty well go anywhere, even walk downtown or to the Oak Bay Marina. So I think it's an area that a lot of younger families would really appreciate. And I think the development my wife and I thought was great. And also it takes advantage of the government program that would allow people to get into a house that they could own. So I'm strongly in favor of this, and I don't see all these other problems as insurmountable. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Next speaker is Susan Kiner.
Hi.
Hi, Susan, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Okay. I just wanted to first of all thank the CALIC for doing this during COVID. It's tough to do, and I really appreciate that you're doing it. I don't live in the neighborhood, but I have a big concern about the fact that it was a heritage property, as the first speaker said. And when I was in Sydney, Australia, I ran across a really interesting house, and it had a plaque on it. And the plaque said, there used to be a heritage house here. The developer tried to do something, and it ended up being torn down. But in the end, the developer had to put up exactly the same house as a replica. So that's an interesting point. That's for Alec Johnson. I don't think we should be incentivizing anybody to build anything when we have these kind of situations where we end up with something being burned down. Oh, great, now we can put too much on it. There's too much mass here. It's too big. I think the neighborhood would be quite willing to have a smaller, more reasonable townhouse development with the trees remaining. And so anyway, I direct this to Alec Johnson. There's got to be some solution to this. And Luke Murray, I challenge you to code back to the table and try and do better than this. You can do better, and I think you should. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan. Once you started talking, I realized who you were. Sorry, I can't see anybody. So, Barbara.
That's okay.
Next speaker is Barbara Righty. Barbara, are you still with us? Okay, maybe we'll come back to Barb.
I got it. No, I think can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Hi, it's Rietti.
Rietti, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just would echo what a lot of the other speakers have already said. It's just seems too big, way too tall, out of character. So that's the structures. The loss of the trees would just be terrible. They can't be replaced. So Victoria either values its heritage trees or it doesn't. And it seems to me that hasn't been given enough consideration. They just can't be replaced. And Victoria doesn't have that many really big old trees like that to lose. And then I just want to make a third point that's personal to me, and it concerns the parking. I believe the developer said that Gonzales is blessed with on-street parking stalls, which means inviting, because there's not enough parking for all the units. So that's like inviting people to park in front of other people's houses. And I should say, I live on the corner of Brighton and Madison. And I recently renovated a very small house that's on a very small lot. And it's probably the oldest house in the neighborhood, actually. I had to get, because the lot is so small, even though the house is small, I had to get a variance to add just 200 square feet. But as part of that, the bylaws kicked in, modern bylaws, which require me to put a driveway in off-street parking where there is now a little garden and a fence that protects the bike shed. And there's room around my property alone for 4 cars to park on the street. But I have 1 car, and I like it on the street. I don't want on-site parking, but the city is requiring me to do that as part of the house, which has nothing to do with what I did. So that's kind of disturbing, the thought that I'm being forced to put parking in that I don't want, and I have to tear up my fence and tear up, well, what it had been a little garden with fig trees and everything, and pour concrete. And so I don't see why that should be an option for the developer and not for private citizens.
Barbara, sorry, thank you. You're over your limit.
Thanks very much. Okay.
Thank you. Next speaker is Ryan Goodman. Ryan, are you still with us?
I think that's an error. He did not register to speak. He's a coworker, so you can keep going.
Okay, sorry. Sarah Murray.
I've already spoken once. Is this an opportunity to speak again?
Nope. Sorry, I'll come back to you. There's just a couple more. Lister Farrer.
Hi, thanks a lot for the opportunity to speak. I think the reason for the meeting is in the name of the committee, the Land Use Committee, and I think that's what we should probably be talking about. And for me, I think the density is important in the neighborhood because it's really difficult to make a house affordable unless there are more of them on the property. And I think you only have to look just to the south on Foul Bay Avenue to see where 4 or 5 very large, expensive houses were put in, and they're in the $2 million range. And I don't think those provide the kind of housing that the speakers who are concerned about affordability would like to see. And reducing the number of townhouses to me doesn't make sense because that can't possibly increase affordability unless you want the developer to give away their investment. And then the question of losing trees also makes me wonder, because if the lot can easily be divided into 4 houses, which actually take more of the area, the alternative to this is actually losing more trees. So while I don't like the idea of losing any of the trees, to me, this plan seems to keep as many as possible. And as far as the parking goes, I would prefer to see no minimum parking, because I think parking is something that very unnecessarily takes space away from people and trees. And a lot of us enjoy parking on public property on streets that we should probably be reconsidering as a good use of our very limited land. And I'm in my last seconds, but I really don't want to live in a boomer ghetto, and I'd like to see more of these small houses. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Karen Ayers. Karen, are you with us?
Thanks. The 42 trees on the site, most of them large mature trees, are a significant value to the neighborhood, to the city, and in the context of climate change, they're critically important. So I'm opposed to the development because of the loss of 24 of those trees and the risk to the remaining ones from digging down to create a lower level and putting townhouses on the critical root zone. Arise has kind of divided the neighborhood by claiming that in order to reduce the density, to protect more trees, that's going to compromise the affordability. The fact is, this is not affordable. The family income required to purchase one of these units is approximately double what the city's maximum by their definition of affordable housing. So it's not even in the ballpark to be considered affordable. If it was, then, then we might be talking about something different. I'm not opposed to townhouses on the site, but 18 is too many. It's just too much built form. 4 levels is too high relative to the immediate neighborhood. And in terms of the alternative that the previous speaker spoke of, the alternative is a smaller development centered on the site that protects a majority of the trees. And that's something I think the neighborhood might be able to support. That's it.
Thank you, Karen.
Hi, Joanna, can I clarify the income for the BC Housing Program?
Yes.
So the income qualification, contrary to the email that went out, is not $190,000 per year. It's the current program is set at $155,000 per year as the maximum household income. But there's actually 2 metrics that restrict the housing pricing. First is the income, the max household income, but then there's also a qualification income on a mortgage that is a secondary kind of catchment. And so the actual qualification income to buy the townhouse, which has a max sale price of $700,000, is actually around $124,000 per year. So, and that doesn't factor into the equation if someone has a larger down payment. So 63% of all millennials in Victoria that are owners actually live in condos. So it's not really out of the realm of reason to think, here's a couple that is a millennial living in a condo, they sell it, they might have an extra $100,000 to purchase one of these homes as they have kids now. And now all of a sudden their income qualification to buy here is $90,000 per year because they're outsized down payment. So I don't think we can just look at the maximum qualification and say everybody has to have that much money. So to be able to afford the unit price is actually much lower than that. And we saw that in closing, sorry, 10 seconds. With the downtown project, that was a similar program. The max income qualification was $155,000, but the average income was actually $68,000 per year. So I know that the max sounds quite large, but it's not. It doesn't tell the whole story about the program. Thank you.
I just wanted to, just to clarify, I was referring to the City of Victoria has a definition of affordable housing, which is a maximum of $85,000 a year. I know that BC Housing's is higher than that, but that's not what I was referring to. So BC Housing's AHOP program may have a larger parameter because it deals with developments all over the province, including like in Vancouver. But this is well beyond the city's definition of affordable housing. That was my point. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for the clarification, both Luke and Karen back. Richard Conwick. Next speaker. Richard?
Hello. Can you hear me? Hi.
Yeah.
Hi. Well, thank you very much for hosting this. I just want to say I am in favor of this development. I think it is appropriate that we open up Gonzales to more affordable opportunities for housing. And of course, when we say affordable, it's all relative. These things are going to be certainly more affordable than any other property on Gonzales. That's basically my point. So thank you. Oh, by the way, I'm at 926 Lawndale. So I am not that far away, but certainly not right next door. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Our last first go-around speaker is Kristen Evans.
Hi.
Hi, we can hear you.
Awesome. I just want to be another voice to say that I'm in support of this project. It's a really exciting thing to see something like this coming up that could be attainable to me and my family. It would provide us with access to a neighborhood that would otherwise be entirely unattainable to us. And we're a community-oriented family. We're cycling. We're a transit-oriented family. We're invested in a sustainable future for people like us. And a project like this would make that possible. So just want to be another voice for big thumbs up, big fan.
Great. Thank you, Linda. Kristen?
That was Kristen. Yeah.
Yeah, Kristen. Yeah. And we have Suzanne Rocio. Suzanne?
Oh, you're there. Suzanne!
Suzanne, can you hear us? You're our last first time round speaker. Okay, we'll come back to Suzanne. Jim Keefe, you asked to have another question?
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. And my question was to Luke in terms of more fully understanding the affordable context. And I guess specifically, you can elaborate on that. Are there public funds involved in this project? And if so, are they from BC Housing, City of Victoria, CMHC? And do how do the conditions of that public funding affect arise in terms of, I guess, the sale price?
Great, thanks, Jim. I'll do my best to answer your question. So are public funds used? Yes, because BC Housing is wholly publicly funded. But the project, BC Housing's involvement is twofold. One, they provide management of covenants and mortgages, a silent second mortgage for the discount over the property. But then their other involvement is they provide construction financing. So this project actually, its return on cost, or in layman terms, return on investment, is actually lower than a typical development project that a bank would finance. So if we were dealing with a conventional bank, this project was not go ahead because it actually doesn't make enough money. So BC Housing encourages a developer to make less money, but in return, they give you low cost financing and security of financing. So that's how they encourage. So it is, and to clarify, we've actually never called this project affordable. That's the name of the program. It's the BC Housing Affordable Homeownership Program. So on your question, so these appraise at a market value, and our preliminary appraisal has them at $900,000 as an average. We're restricted at selling them for $700,000, which is $200,000 below market. BC Housing secures that $200,000 discount as a silent second mortgage on title behind a traditional lender. When the buyer goes to sell, that mortgage, that second mortgage that BC Housing captures, the federal government considers that to be a portion of their down payment. So even though they might only have to put 5% down, which would be $35,000, the federal government thinks they're putting $235,000 down. So it opens up access to 30-year amortizations, which means lower payments, lower interest rates, and other benefits. When they go to sell the home, they have to share the increase in unit value with BC Housing. And when BC Housing gets that money, they pass it to the City of Victoria to fund deeper affordable projects. So it's not like this project is solving the housing crisis. That's not what we're saying. But its appreciation over time actually does contribute because the City of Victoria funds, supportive housing projects and much deeper affordability. So it's a bit of a pay it forward program. So it helps people get in with lower down payments, below market housing, and then it pays that appreciation back to the city over time. So it's actually quite an innovative program. Does that answer the question, kind of?
I think so. So BC Housing has approved this project then in this context?
No, so BC Housing does not approve the project until it goes through like rezoning. So what you do is you enter what's in. They essentially issue a letter of support, like a letter of intent to us. There's a tri-party agreement that we enter into with BC Housing, the City of Victoria, and ourselves that gets registered on title, and then post approvals, BC Housing, formalizes that relationship.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That actually was a very informative discussion. So I hoping other people learned a bit more on that.
Joanne, it's Mary.
Hold on a second, just a minute, Mary, please. It looks like we've reached we have reached 8:30, but 8:30 actually isn't 90 minutes because we didn't start till, I don't know, like 10 after 7. So we do actually have 3 people that have asked to speak again. I'd like to get through those 3 people.
And I want to say one statement that will take
Mary, can you just hold on till we get through the other people, please? We have to go through.
Yes, happy to.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Sarah Murray, Linda, Carl Monk, and Mary, we have you down as second speakers. So if we can get through those, and then we'll see what time we're at. So Sarah Murray?
My question was actually about the affordability, and that answered it, so thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Linda Brackett, neighbor? Linda, I don't know what your last name is.
Sorry.
Okay.
Actually, Arise has referred to this as affordable housing, just to clarify, because their comments that were made on social media basically stated to neighbors that they were getting in the way of affordable housing. So I'm trying to understand here, are these units 900,000 or 700,000?
Luke, can you answer that?
Max sale price 700,000 under the current BC Housing program. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the selling price?
That is correct.
So, okay, and the down payment is on 700,000.
So as it stands now, there is no down payment requirement. So in theory, that discount is 100% of the required down payment to secure 20% down with the federal government. BC Housing has indicated that due to COVID-19 and capital shortfalls within government as a whole, they might introduce a 5% down payment requirement. It's not official yet, but it might be coming is what we've been told. So we're planning for it and saying that it's a potentiality. And so that would be $35,000 required. Yeah.
Okay. So my understanding is that when it comes to CMHC and 30-year amortizations, it's not based on these programs, both federal and provincial. The borrower is still borrowing the money. It's still borrowed money. It may be a second mortgage and it may reduce the amount that they need CMHC fees on, but it's still borrowed money. So there is no such thing as a 30-year amortization on that. You can shake your head, but I've checked this out with a mortgage broker. So I think it's really important that the affordability aspect of this be very clear. You know, when you're talking to the neighbors about it, because it's been very vague. Online, you've said they're 900,000, they're 700,000, they're this, they're that. So you need to be more. There needs to be some clarification.
Yeah, so I would encourage you to email me any social media posts that say that they're going to be $900,000 because I can't recall.
Oh, I've
any
got
of that.
screenshots. I've got tons of screenshots. Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Info@arise.ca.
And there's also an article in the Vic News where you said they were 900,000 and they were going to sell, they were going to be discounted. So 900,000 has definitely been said many times.
Okay, so
$900,000 has been said within the context of their assessed or their appraised value, never their sale value. The program does not allow for the homes to be sold for that much. This is not a federal government program. So the federal government has a concurrent shared equity program that people can qualify for like the shared equity model. This does not fall under that. This is exclusively a provincial program. So the federal government considers that $200,000 discount as a portion of the down payment. So they do not have to qualify for the $900,000 appraised value. They only have to qualify for their paid value, which is $700,000 minus $35,000.
But they still have to pay CMHC fees.
No,
and there will be
that is
no
incorrect. They do not. They do not have to pay CMHC fees, and it does amortize at 30 years. So I don't know which mortgage broker you've talked to, but there's not all banks understand this program. So BC Housing actually has a list of banks that have quasi been educated on the program, and they include banks like Van City, RBC, CIBC, but not all banks recognize the merit of the program. So that is a shortfall. So a buyer can't go to every single lender out there and have them understand it.
Can I interrupt here, please, and encourage you to have this discussion offline because I think we have enough information on the program for this discussion. Thank you. And if anybody's trying to send me a private chat, I can't see anything. My computer and the whole thing is frozen. So if you have something you would like to ask or to get put on, just send a chat to Fairfield. I think it's called Fairfield Place. I can't even pull it up. So, and then I'm texting with Owen so I can see who wants to speak. Our next speaker is Carl Monk. Carl, do we still have you?
Hi there. Yeah, you sure do, Joanna. Thanks for and thanks for hosting this tonight. Thanks for everybody for being here. I just wanted to go on record. This is my first go around, actually.
Okay. Thanks.
I own the property at 1927 Qualification, so kitty corner to the proposed development. And I just want to go on record saying I'm opposed to it for a couple of different reasons. First, I'd like to say that I'm all in favor of denser and greener living. But if you want to build that, put in 4 or 8. If you're going to put in 18, build it closer to the village, and it fits in with the character of Oak Bay Avenue. And I can point you to Cook Street, where there's a new sleek building that's gone in the Cook Street Village. It's fantastic. It fits with the character. But if you put that housing with the city's definition. And last, I wanted to talk about just the manner in which things have gone ahead. Notwithstanding the Heritage House burnt down, and someone mentioned, let's not incentivize building 18 on a Heritage House that burnt down in mysterious circumstances where charges were laid and then withdrawn. But I want to say that, look, I'm a lawyer and I received service, and the wording was so strong that it scared me. And when we had a community meeting, it scared the neighbors, because it was so strongly worded that it made it look like if you're a neighbor and you tried to take action and fight back, that it would all come back at you. So it was really, something that it didn't really rub me the right way, if I could put it that way. So I'd like to go on the record saying that I'm opposed to this development, unless you change it, put in lesser units. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Carl. Mary?
Yes, I will be really quick and specific. Back to trees. People may not be aware that when you remove trees, that there's a wide swath. Trees work as a group, like a brain, and they send signals to each other, including fear and so on. But so when you cut trees down, there's a whole wide swath. Obviously, the more you cut down, the bigger the swath. And those trees they won't die immediately, but they die much faster. And so after a few years, they'll be in a poor state. So it's not just the trees you're cutting down. For every tree, you're going to add to the swath of damaged and dying trees. And that's a fact, okay?
Thank you, Mary. Karen Ayers. Karen?
Karen.
Okay, we'll come back to Karen if we have time. Erica Sangster, who is the architect, would also like to speak as a resident.
Thank you. Well, architect / resident. I just wanted to say a word here because there hasn't been much in the way of questions I've needed to answer, but I don't want you to think of me as some anonymous, faceless architect that's come in and imposed this on the neighborhood. I've lived at 945 Cowichan for over 15 years. So I'm just up the street with a backyard on Redfern with a basketball hoop and a hockey net and a tire swing. And I've got a 9-year-old and a 13-year-old and a dog, and I'm living in this neighborhood. When I first started on the project, I had to really grapple with my own attachment to the site and the trees. We've had like a park at the end of our block all these years. And I got involved, even though I knew it would sort of lay me a bit bare to my neighborhood in a way that I'm not usually, because I don't usually work in this neighborhood. I work more in urban settings. But I took the challenge of trying to find a way to make this pro forma work in a way that I think is integrated with our neighborhood, takes cues from the neighborhood. And I have a responsibility both professionally, but also personally, that I will be living with this development if it goes ahead also. So I recognize some of these faces. I hope to continue saying hello on the street, and now I'll have some more faces to keep an eye out for. And I hope you'll say hello. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. And it's always interesting when people who work on the project live in the neighborhood, so that's great. We have come to the end of questions. I am going to attempt to summarize what the discussion was about, and there will be a report written, and it will be on the Fairfield Gonzalez Community Association website, and it will be sent, it's this report that is sent to the city. So we heard a lot about ecology, concerns about ecology, safety, tree protection, lots of discussion about affordability and what exactly that means. The heritage designation, which is the covenant, which we're not going to talk about anyway. We talked about the neighborhood plan, and Alec Johnson did confirm that planning, preservation, open site space, tree policies, all these policies are considered with applications, not just this one. A lot of discussion about the traffic and how it will increase and be potentially difficult for cyclists, walkers, and kids. Heard about it being too big, too high, out of character, no play areas, lots about the trees, but then we also heard about diversity in the neighborhood and how there needs to be, according to some of the speakers, more diversity in the neighborhood. There are people in some professions that can't afford to live here, and having something that's a bit more affordable would be appreciated. Also heard about the parks that are around for play areas and the walkability, and how this would be great to have families in this neighborhood, more families in the neighborhood. As I said, there was lots of discussion about the program, the BC Housing Program, and it sounds like this program only kicks in and gets approved once the application is approved, and so the works are in for that so that they're ready. And yeah, so
Excuse me.
Yes, Mary?
Now, don't forget my point about he talked about covenants.
Yeah.
About the covenant not being, it's not
Mary?
in the.
Yeah, that's not part of our mandate to discuss the covenant, so that's
I'm
something.
sorry, I said it. It should
Okay.
be kept as a comment.
Okay.
That, okay.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. So thank you for your energy and your interest and your engagement with this project. I really do hope that this second community meeting encourages you to speak to your neighbors about it, to seek the applicant out and discuss with the applicant some of your concerns. This process is one that is really important in our community. And I mean, I live in the community as well, right? So I like to see people being involved and caring about what's happening. So if there's no further questions, we are sort of over our hour and a half, but I thank you very much for your time, and I wish everybody happy holidays. And please, if you have comments that you haven't put on the development tracker, you have until January 6th. So we are seeing a lot of responses coming in, both